Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. We're pleased to be presenting Chado to you today at the Victoria Tea Festival Revival. I, too, would like to first start by acknowledging that we are gathered here today, and we also study our lessons on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen peoples, known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet with you all today and to celebrate all things tea. My name is Natalie, and I am part of the Urasenke Tankokai Association of Victoria, and we are one of many associations studying the way of tea, or Chado, around the world. And our association here in Victoria was founded by an amazing woman, Mito Sensei, who shares her love of all things Chado with all of her students. Our Grand Tea Master, O Iemoto Sen Soshitsu, is our 16th Grand Tea Master in the Urasenke tradition. And we follow the spirit of Wa Ke Se Jaku. And in fact, our scroll today says Wa. And that stands for harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. And that's the emotion we want to convey to you today. And we approach our tea with the thought of Ichigo Ichie, which is loosely translated, one chance, one meeting. And what it means is that this occasion, with everyone gathered here today, will never occur in exactly the same way again. So we appreciate you being here and being in the moment. And in the spirit of that, while photography is absolutely permitted, please refrain from using a flash and also be mindful of your fellow attendees. Our founder of the Way of Tea, Senrikyu, actually emphasized using simple tools, local items, and simplicity in the actual demonstration itself. And that made tea, or Chado, more accessible to all folks in Japan, regardless of their rank or status. Prior to that, it was more of a noble or high-ranking endeavor. Traditionally, you may have seen, Chado is performed on tatami mats, and you kneel on the floor. And today, we're actually going to be demonstrating the ryure style, or table style of tea. And this was developed in the Meiji era, when Japan was opening itself up and welcoming Westerners to the country. But with Western guests come Western clothing restrictions, as well as Western needs. And so the ryure style was designed to allow all people to participate, regardless of their level of ability. And it definitely opened up Chado to more people to enjoy, both as guests or even as students of the discipline. After the demonstration, we will have time for questions. And as well, we have a booth just outside where we will be demonstrating whisking techniques for anyone who would like to see that up close and personal. And my personal favorite, we will be selling some tea sweets as well, and we do hope you enjoy. Okay. Within Chado, there are many ways to serve tea in many different formalities. They depend on the season, what our host wants to convey, and the guests that are coming, or maybe even the occasion being celebrated. Today, we'll be presenting Misonodana. It's a thin tea called a sucha, and there are also ceremonies that use a thick tea called a koicha. And I just want to take a moment to recognize Jaga Silk, who was very generous in their donation, and the thin tea, or usucha, we're using is Okumidori Okuda by Fujioka from the Wazuka in Kyoto. A very lovely tea. And without further ado, we're going to begin the ceremony. And to start, I'm going to introduce our Tankokai Association members who will be presenting to you today. Our host today is Yuta, also known as the Teishu, and his assistant is Ayako, also known as the Hanto. Our first guest, also Ayako, or the Osho Kakyu. And our second guest is Diane, or our Ji Kakyu. And we'll begin the ceremony. I'm not sure if anyone could hear him, but he said Okashio Dozo as he presents the sweets to our guests. While the ceremony is occurring, I will be describing some of the actions and translating for things as well. But again, if you have any questions after the ceremony, please don't hesitate to ask. A lot of the ceremony does take place in silences, so you learn to be comfortable in the silence as well, and lets you really appreciate the moment. The first part of a tea ceremony begins with a ceremonial purification of the tea implements used. Now, this is different than cleaning. Of course, everything is meticulously cleaned beforehand, but the purification has many different benefits. One, it shows the respect and care our host has for our guests. And two, it really centers the host and focuses them in on this moment. I want to draw your attention to the tea bowl we're using today. This is actually made by a local artist, Katie Fogg, and we chose it specifically because we love the colors. We feel they represent the West Coast, and especially in this season of the year where our oceans are a little bit more vigorous than they were during the summer. For those of you who have maybe attended a tea ceremony before, you'll notice or perhaps recognize that there are different movements depending on whether you're male or female as the host. And so each tea ceremony really reflects the host themselves and what they do. One of the key things is men have to open the hot kettle lid with their bare fingers, but ladies get to use a cloth to protect ourselves. What Yuta is doing now is warming the tea bowl and doing another purification step with the whisk. And not only, again, showing care and consideration for our guests, but it has an added benefit of bringing the tea bowl up to a temperature to make sure our beautiful matcha is served at the right temperature, but also allowing the whisk a chance to soften and bloom, which enables a better froth at the end. Our assistant has asked our first guest to begin enjoying their sweets. And for those of you who've maybe had a matcha before and thought, that's a little astringent, maybe not for me, matcha is actually the entire tea leaf stone ground, and it's prepared in a very special way. So it's quite different than a Western infusion of a tea bag into hot water. Because it is the entire tea leaf, which is it's actually covered from the sun for a few weeks before picking, which gives it an absolutely amazing bright green. And then it's picked at the height of fleshness and stone ground in these big stone mills. But it's an entire tea leaf, so it does taste a little bit astringent, and so it's designed to be eaten with a sweet just beforehand. That sweet shouldn't be heavily flavored. It should just be sweet, which allows you to have a bit of sweetness on your tongue, and it lets the true complexities of the flavor really shine through and cuts that astringency. So I do encourage you, if you didn't care for it before, try it just after having a sweet and see if you change your mind. I'm always amazed when people whisk tea, how still their bodies remain, and yet they're really vigorously whisking that tea to get that beautiful suspension. Now, the mark of a beautifully whisked tea is if, and it might be hard to see from your seats, there's a tiny dollop of foam on the tip of the whisk. And if you have a chance to look in the tea bowl, which I'm not sure our cameras are going to permit, you would notice that there's a beautiful layer of froth right on the top of the tea and very small, fine bubbles. Now pay close attention to how the tea bowl is turned as it is transported around the tea room. And this is to indicate respect. So when you're carrying the tea or working with the tea bowl, you have the front of the tea bowl facing you. And our guest is going to apologize to our second guest for going first. And then say she's about to enjoy the tea to our host. And you'll notice she turns the tea bowl, so now the rear of the tea or the back of the tea bowl faces her to show humility and humbleness in enjoying this tea with everyone today. What our host has just said is, I'm going to use a second bowl for our second guest. Traditionally, the first bowl would come back. We would make another tea. But the beauty of our tea ceremonies is they're constantly evolving to adapt to the new times, to account for demonstrations like this where we don't have maybe as much time as we normally would. Our host, or our Hanto has just checked in to make sure our guest enjoyed the tea. And you'll notice our guest has now turned the tea bowl back to herself, to the front, so that she could admire the tea bowl that our host has chosen for her today. Our first guest, and our assistant are just chatting now. It's a very comfortable tea, and it is encouraged about the scroll that we've chosen today, Wa. And often conversations will also involve what kind of flowers did we pick. And today you can see we have a lovely dogwood, and we've put some maple leaves around as well to embrace the spirit of fall. Our assistant is asking if we enjoyed the sweets as well. Our guests enjoyed the sweets. And we're pleased to say that the sweets are also the ones we're going to be selling. Ho ho! Wow. Ayako is also Yuta sensei, and she's just let me know that Yuta has been studying for about 6 months. That's very impressive to then be performing. And his movements are very beautiful.
ありがとうございます。
Diane is now letting the first guest know that she is going to join her in a bowl of tea. And our first guest, Ayako, has said, please do so. Please join me. And she's let the host know that she's now going to enjoy the tea that has been served. What Ayako, our first guest, has now said is that she is replete
おしまいにい
and
たします。
the host may now finish the tea. If she had not said that phrase, that would have been a very subtle indicator that she would like another bowl of tea, and the host would have immediately begun making a new bowl of tea for her. But because she has said that, he will now commence closing the tea ceremony by cleaning the bowl and putting everything back to rights as how it started. Now, for those of you watching Yuta's movements, you'll notice that he put the scoop down in a different fashion this time. And there are actually different ways of doing that depending on whether you're using hot or cold water and whether or not you're about to make tea or you're just warming the bowl. There's different movements for each. Our guest very much enjoyed her tea, and she's letting our assistant know that. In case you're worried, no, he's not pouring water on the floor. When he first came in, he was carrying a waste container that he very subtly put down on a shelf that you can't see. there's a beautiful symmetry to the tea ceremonies where how you started is very often how you finish. And so you'll see all the implements are going back to their original positions. And this is my favorite part. What he's doing now is Yuta is taking a scoop of cold water and transferring it to the hot water kettle or kama to indicate that there's always water ready for tea should we ever have a guest who desires it. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And big thank you to our Tankokai Association members for their beautiful demonstration. I do encourage any questions, anything you would like to ask. Yes, go ahead, sir.
When it comes to the sweets or the matcha,
Mhm.
Is there a certain kind of sugar that's used for that?
Great question. The gentleman has asked if there is a certain kind of sugar used for the sweets, and I'm happy to report no. The sweets can be a variety of different things. You may have seen a jellied sweet made with agar-agar and a lot of white sugar. This sweet that we use today, there were two different kinds. One is a maple syrup sugar candy, boiled down to a beautiful consistency. And the other one is a pressed sugar candy with that powdered sugar pressed into a mold. You can also find something called competto. They look like tiny little rock sugar candy stars. They're used as well. So really it's about just getting a sweetness into your mouth. Yeah. Yes?
What fabric is the purple cloth?
Silk. Yes. Good question. The lady asked it, what is the fabric made of in the purple cloth? Go ahead, miss.
Does it matter if the person performing the ceremony is right-handed or left-handed?
Ooh, great question. Question is, does it matter if the person performing the ceremony is right-handed or left-handed? I have been studying tea for over 10 years and I don't know the answer to that question. So I'm going to put a pin in it and I will try and find out and get back to you. Okay? And I think, yes. Yes and no. The question was, she noticed that the purification cloth is folded. Is there meaning to those folds? And yes, insofar as it's folded specific ways depending on what it is you're doing, but that changes depending on the tea ceremony that you're performing. So there are some folds that you do and it turns into a little tiny book of cloth. Yuta folds it this way for this particular tea. And it is a bit stylized to allow you to focus on the moment rather than having to remember a multitude of steps. But great question. Yes. Oh, wonderful question. So the question was, if your guest has never been to a tea ceremony before, how do they know what to do? What do they do? Or are there any indications? And I'm really pleased you asked that because Senrikyu once said, at the end of the day, tea is about sharing a moment with your guest. And it's the comfort of the guest that is paramount, not all the accoutrements. So you can proactively give your guests a heads up beforehand. A lot of us, if you travel to Japan, may get surprised with a tea ceremony because a host would like to honor you with a tea ceremony. It's your comfort level, and you are allowed to talk. We were a little quiet here today, but you are allowed to be like, okay, now you can turn the bowl often we'll have an audience member as one of our guests, and we'll have a guest that's experienced to help them along. So it's very nice. I thought I saw another hand. I hope that answers your question, by the way. Yes. And then this gentleman. Mm-hmm. Purifying. Yeah. Ah, thank you. So the question was, what is the meaning of the purification of the implements? So as we mentioned, everything is meticulously cleaned beforehand. The purification has several benefits. One, it allows us to show respect to the guests with care and consideration. We want to make sure everything is just right for you. But it also, I'm not going to translate this very accurately, but the purification allows the moment to go into the blood, into the body of the host, to focus in on this moment. You can't be thinking about your next steps or what are you going to do for dinner tonight or anything like that. You're in the moment and now, and you're treating this moment as Ichigo Ichie. Thank you.
Yeah. With this style of table ceremony
Hmm?
and the introduction of Europeans, I guess Dutch traders to Japan,
Mhm.
I guess that might have been a time. Did Western or European influence more the style of tea ceremony, or did the tea ceremony of Japan influence more have a more of an influence on European style of tea and like bring more of a ceremonial quality to Western culture?
Excellent question. So the question, and if I'll paraphrase it here, was with the introduction of Western sensibilities into the Meiji era in Japan, did Japanese tea ceremony get influenced by the Western culture? Or did the Japanese tea ceremony or tea behaviors influence a lot of the Western culture's tea? And to be honest, I'm not a historian, and that's a great question, but I just absolutely don't know. I'm so sorry. I bet there are tea experts like Jared from Jaga Silk could probably give you a better answer than I can, but I apologize. I'm so sorry. Any other questions? Comments? We would love to hear from you. Well then, thank you everyone very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and I will turn it back over to Jen.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having us. It was our pleasure.
Thank you. Arigato. Thank you. Thank you. Arigato.
And don't forget to visit our booth.
What an absolute pleasure that was. And I love how it instills this sense of peace and of specialness in a moment. And it really cultivates awareness, which is something that we need more of in our world today. Ayako Sensei, arigato. So wonderful. She blesses us every year with coming, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, and well done. 6 months. That's so impressive. It's a real tradition, and Mew, Jared's wife, she is also practicing, and so I encourage you to come on Fridays and try some beautiful. I personally, my perfect day is going to Uchida and getting a gorgeous lunch. And then I go down the stairs to Jaga Silk and I sit at the bar and I have a matcha ceremony flight, 3 different matchas, and it's a perfect day. So thank you so much. Arigato. Wonderful. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. And our next talk starts at 12. And we've got Eric Smythe from Cloudwalker Tea. And so I encourage you, how are we doing for time? 5 to 12. So yeah, we're going to have a quick switch over here. Thank you so much for coming. Should we...